My dad's girlfriend convinced him I stole her jewelry. He pressed charges, and now they want a family reunion. I never thought I'd see the day when my dad looked me straight in the eyes and accused me of theft. There was something surreal about standing on the front porch of my childhood home, hearing the man who'd raised me, taught me to ride a bike, cheered at my middle school plays, accuse me of being a criminal. And it wasn't just a passing accusation either. He genuinely believed I'd stolen jewelry from his girlfriend. The memory of his voice, raw with anger, still makes my stomach twist. But perhaps worse than the anger was the betrayal, how he pressed charges and allowed me, his own daughter, to become entangled in a legal nightmare. Now, after all of that, he and his girlfriend want a so-called family reunion. They want to forget the damage and pretend everything's fine. It's unbelievable how easily some people can rewrite history when it suits them. I guess I should start at the beginning, back when Dad first met Janice. I was in my early 20s, fresh out of college, and he'd been divorced from my mom for a few years by then. My mom and I lived in the same city but different neighborhoods, and although I visited my dad fairly often, we'd grown used to the fact that my parents would never reconcile. When Dad started dating again, I was happy for him. He deserved to move on with his life, find someone who made him feel alive and appreciated. I remember being cautiously optimistic when he first mentioned Janice, a woman from his office who was smart, hardworking, and pretty as can be. At the time, that was all I knew. The first time I met her, I saw glimpses of the charm that must have drawn him in. Janice was in her early 40s, a tall woman with auburn hair that fell in waves around her shoulders. She carried herself with a poise that gave me the impression she was competent and confident. She wore stylish clothes, a subtle perfume, and seemed eager to impress my father's daughter. At the dinner table, she smiled frequently, asked questions about my college major and career plans, and told jokes that made my dad throw his head back and laugh. Everything felt cordial. I can't say I warmed to her instantly, but that was simply because she was new, and I wanted time to gauge whether she was good for him. Over the following months, Janice continued to embed herself deeper into Dad's life. She came over often, joined him at family events, and even started redecorating parts of his house under the guise of making it more welcoming. At first, it was small touches. New throw pillows, fresh curtains, updated rugs, but it escalated to bigger changes. She convinced him to buy new furniture, swap out the old family photos for modern frames, and reorganize the garage to optimize space. Dad seemed happy to have someone bring fresh energy into his home, and I tried to keep an open mind. After all, it was his house, and it was natural for a new partner to want to put her mark on things. But somewhere during that process, I felt a quiet tension building between Janice and me. It was nothing overt, just little remarks here and there. She'd tease me about being the sentimental type, or she'd comment on how lucky I was that Dad was paying for my graduate school. He wasn't. He'd offered some financial help, but I was mostly relying on scholarships, personal savings, and part-time work. She seemed to believe otherwise. She'd lightly criticize my style choices, telling me I should aim for a more professional image if I wanted to succeed. All harmless on the surface, but there was a faint condescending edge that grated on me. Dad didn't notice or pretended not to. Maybe he was just too swept up in having a partner after years of being single. Whenever Janice made a jab that felt a bit too pointed, I'd glance at him, but he'd only smile, oblivious. I brushed off these microaggressions because it felt petty to complain. I figured we could coexist peacefully, especially if she made Dad happy. However, I was wrong about how manageable it would be. Soon enough, those subtle barbs escalated into something much worse. Dad proposed to Janice about a year after they started dating. He called me on a Tuesday morning to share the news. I remember it vividly because I was still half asleep, fumbling for my phone, and his voice boomed with excitement. "She said yes." I managed a groggy but sincere congratulations. He then said they wanted to have an engagement party that weekend, inviting family and close friends. Part of me was apprehensive, but I squashed that feeling. I told myself that if Dad wanted to marry this woman, then I should support it. At the engagement party, I gave them each a hug, congratulated them sincerely, and tried to ignore the uneasy vibe whenever Janice glanced my way. A few months later, Janice officially moved in with Dad. She brought all her furniture and decorations, practically transforming the house I grew up in into a place I barely recognized. Again, I tried to stay supportive, reminding myself that Dad's happiness was the priority. However, it wasn't just about aesthetics. Janice rearranged the entire dynamic of that household. She insisted on weekly dinner gatherings where I was expected to attend so that we could bond as a family. Dad liked the idea of us all being together regularly, so I didn't object, but each dinner left me feeling drained. Janice would pepper me with questions about my work, my finances, and my personal life. If she disapproved of my answers, she'd scold me in that motherly tone I'd never asked for. "You shouldn't do that," or "I think you're making a big mistake there," or "You really should listen to me, I'm older and wiser." She framed it as concern, but the vibe was always that she was criticizing me for not living up to her standards. After one such dinner, Janice asked me to stay behind and help clean up. Dad had stepped out to pick up dessert from a bakery down the street, so it was just the two of us in the kitchen. As we loaded dishes into the sink, she turned to me and said, "I'm worried about your father. He's spending so much money these days, and I suspect it's because he's trying to help you financially. Are you relying on him too much?" I stiffened. "I'm not relying on him." He offered to help pay for part of my tuition. I appreciated that, but I'm still working. I'm not draining him. She made a face that suggested doubt. "He's mentioned how stressed he is about finances lately, and I just thought maybe you could ease the burden by being more independent." That was news to me. As far as I knew, Dad was financially comfortable. He'd never once said he was stressed about money. Something about her insinuation that I was mooching made me furious, but I swallowed my anger and said, "I am independent. He's not paying my rent or my bills. If he's stressed, maybe it's because of the wedding costs. You two are planning quite a big event, right?" Janice's eyes narrowed, but she quickly replaced the expression with a tight smile. "Yes, we are. It's going to be lovely. I hope you'll do your part to contribute as well. It's a family affair, after all." The passive aggressiveness was reaching a boiling point. Instead of arguing, I excused myself and left. That night, I lay awake, wondering why she seemed to resent me so much. Could it be insecurity about my relationship with Dad? Or did she genuinely believe I was a financial parasite? The tension kept escalating. Then came the day that changed everything. I got a call from Dad while I was at work. His voice was icy cold. He said, "We need to talk." I asked what was wrong, and he answered, "Janice's jewelry is missing. She swears she last saw it in her vanity drawer 2 days ago. You were over for dinner that night, right? Something you want to tell me?" My heart pounded. I let out a stunned laugh, thinking it had to be a bad joke. "Dad, are you serious? You think I took her jewelry?" "She does," he replied gravely. "She says you had the opportunity, and you've been having money issues, right? So it fits." Money issues? Because I was a graduate student with loans? That was hardly a reason to commit theft. I insisted I hadn't taken anything. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation at the mere suggestion. Dad's voice remained rigid. "Can you come to the house right now? We need to get to the bottom of this." I told my boss I had a family emergency and left work in a daze. During the drive, I tried to calm myself, rationalizing that once I told Dad my side of the story, he'd believe me. He'd realized Janice was mistaken or had misplaced her jewelry. But when I arrived, Janice stood in the living room, arms folded, her eyes red from tears. Dad looked stern and wouldn't meet my gaze. It quickly became clear this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Janice had fully convinced him I was guilty. "Where are they?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Those necklaces were heirlooms from my grandmother. My diamond earrings, too. I need them back." I told her, firmly but politely, that I had no idea what she was talking about. Dad stepped in, voice tense. "Look, if you did this, we can figure out a way to make it right. You don't have to lie." I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. "Dad, you know me. I would never." Janice interrupted. "I don't want to do this, but if you don't return them, I'm calling the police." And that was precisely what she did. Before I could wrap my head around it, Dad was saying something about giving me time to confess, or else. I remember the shock of hearing sirens, then uniformed officers stepping into my childhood home, politely but firmly asking me questions. One of them asked if they could search my bag, my car. I was too stunned to argue, so I cooperated. Of course, they found nothing. Still, the official complaint had been lodged by Janice, with Dad backing her up, claiming I stole thousands of dollars worth of heirloom jewelry. The police told me I had to go to the station for further questioning. I asked my father if he truly wanted this, and he just shook his head, face grim, saying, "I have to do what's right for Janice. If you didn't take them, then eventually the truth will come out, but I need to know you're not lying." That moment shattered something inside me. I felt tears of rage and heartbreak burn my eyes. My own father was basically siding with a woman he'd known for barely 2 years over me, his daughter. Nothing I said could convince him. They took me to the station, where I gave a statement, insisted on my innocence, and eventually was released. But the official process had begun. Dad pressed charges on Janice's behalf, claiming he had probable cause because I was the only one in the house besides them that night, and apparently some security footage from their new cameras showed me going upstairs at one point. I'd gone to use the bathroom, but Janice insisted I must have gone through her vanity. I had to hire a lawyer, an expense I could barely handle. My mom was furious, calling Dad day and night to demand he drop the charges, but Dad argued that it wasn't his alone to drop, because Janice was the victim. He said he had to stand by his fiancée. I didn't speak to him after that. My lawyer told me to keep a low profile, avoid direct confrontation, and gather any evidence that could help me. It was a nightmare. The story spread among extended family members. "Did you hear? She stole Janice's jewelry." Some believed I was innocent. Others were unsure. And still others avoided me entirely because they didn't want to take sides. Over the next few weeks, I tried to piece together anything that might prove my innocence. My best friend reminded me that I'd taken a few photos on my phone around the time Janice claimed the jewelry went missing, pictures of me and my friend at a restaurant that same evening, time-stamped, but that only covered part of the evening, not the portion I'd spent at Dad's house. Meanwhile, Janice produced receipts and insurance documents proving she owned those pieces. The police asked if I'd pawned them somewhere, if I'd sold them online. I hadn't, obviously, but I had no way to prove a negative. The fact that the jewelry was truly missing only made it worse. Janice swore she hadn't misplaced it. Dad believed her. The cops had to consider the possibility that I took them. The case dragged on, and the stress took a toll on me. I lost weight, had trouble sleeping, and struggled to concentrate at work. My boss noticed and gave me some leeway, but I felt the pressure mounting. I was an adult with a potential criminal charge hanging over my head. All because Dad's girlfriend either genuinely believed I stole from her or was deliberately framing me to eliminate me from Dad's life. Either way, Dad let it happen. Finally, after nearly 2 months, there was a breakthrough. The jewelry turned up inside a storage locker that belonged to Janice's ex-husband. The story was complicated. Apparently, Janice had stored some personal belongings there, including old furniture and boxes. A manager at the storage facility discovered the locker was behind on payments and initiated an inventory. In the process, they found a small box of jewelry matching the description of the missing pieces. The manager contacted Janice's ex, who was listed on the lease. He, in turn, contacted Janice. She realized that these were the same items she'd accused me of stealing. The police got wind of it, and just like that, the charges against me were dropped. I recall the phone call I received from my lawyer. "Great news, they found the jewelry. The DA is dismissing the case." I let out a long breath, feeling relief flood my veins. I was free of that horrifying suspicion. But I was also enraged. My name had been dragged through the mud because Janice had either forgotten she'd placed those items in storage, or my darker suspicion had done it deliberately. My dad's gullibility or refusal to believe me wounded me more deeply than I could articulate. I expected an apology from Dad the minute the case was dropped. Instead, he was slow to reach out. When he finally called, it was a stilted, awkward conversation. He stammered, "I'm glad you're off the hook," as though I'd been guilty but lucked out. I nearly screamed at him, but I held it in, asking calmly, "Do you understand that I was innocent all along? That this was all Janice's mistake?" He mumbled something about how Janice didn't remember putting the jewelry in storage, that she'd been stressed and thought I was the only logical suspect. "You have to understand," he insisted. We only did what we thought was right. You were the only one there that night. I told him that if he'd truly known me, if he'd truly trusted his own daughter, he would never have believed I could stoop to theft. I said I needed time away from him, from Janice, from everything. He pleaded for me to stay on the phone, but I hung up. Then I blocked him and Janice on my phone and social media. I felt battered by their betrayal. A short while later, I sent him a letter detailing my hurt, telling him that I couldn't be part of his life as long as Janice was in it because she'd proven she could ruin me with a single lie. If he wanted a relationship with me, he had to face the consequences of what happened. Life went on. I focused on healing, therapy, and trying to repair the social damage. Some people had believed the rumors. I had to explain again and again that the charges were dismissed. A few relatives told me, at least your name is cleared. Now you can all move on. But I couldn't just sweep it under the rug. Dad had pressed charges against me. My father, I still struggled to wrap my mind around that. Whenever I felt the sting of heartbreak, I'd remind myself that at least I was free, no criminal record attached to my name. But the emotional scars were deep. For a year, I had minimal contact with Dad. He tried to call me on birthdays, holidays, but I rarely responded. I couldn't bear hearing him mention Janice or pretend everything was normal. I found out through the grapevine that they'd postponed their wedding, presumably because Janice felt guilty or was under stress. My mom told me that Dad looked miserable whenever she saw him at mutual friends' gatherings. Part of me felt pity, but another part felt he'd brought this upon himself by siding with someone who was so quick to accuse me. Then, out of nowhere, my father's sister, my aunt, called me. She said Dad was planning a big family reunion and wanted me to attend. I was dumbfounded. A reunion? Now? She explained that Dad and Janice had sorted out their issues, had just gotten married in a small civil ceremony, and wanted to host a big get-together for extended family and close friends. My aunt said I was, of course, invited. She sounded hopeful, like this might be the chance for all of us to reconcile. I thanked her for letting me know, but inside my anger flared up. Reconcile? After all that? They press charges against me. Then a year goes by, they get married in secret, and now they want to play happy families? A few days later, I got a direct call from Dad. My heart pounded when I saw his name on my phone screen. I hesitated, but decided to pick up, maybe to get some clarity. He said, "Hey, kiddo," that old affectionate tone. It made me want to scream. I was curt. "Hi." He jumped right in. "So Janice and I are having a family reunion picnic at the park next month. I really want you to come. We want to put the past behind us." I bit back a sharp retort. "Put the past behind us? You accused me of stealing. I nearly faced criminal charges. You believed I was a thief, Dad. That's not something we can just forget." He sighed. I know, and I'm so sorry. I swear, Janice feels terrible. She wants to apologize in person. This reunion is our way of showing we want a fresh start. You're my daughter, and it kills me that we've been estranged." I said nothing. Let him talk. He continued. "We postponed the wedding for a while because things were too tense. We ended up just doing a small ceremony in front of a judge last month, but we want a big celebration with all our loved ones. You're part of that. Please come." My anger roiled, but a tiny part of me felt a pang of longing for the father I used to know, the one who'd taught me how to fish, who once told me bedtime stories with silly voices. Could I truly never see him again? "Dad," I said, voice trembling, "you have no idea how hurt I am. An apology over the phone isn't going to fix this. And Janice, she's the one who caused all this pain." He was silent for a moment, then said, "She wants to make amends. She knows she messed up. She wants to talk it out with you face to face. No hostility." I scoffed. "No hostility? She called the cops on me. She had me questioned like a criminal. My entire life was derailed for months." "I know," Dad whispered. "I'm begging you, give her a chance to explain. She swears it was an honest mistake. She truly believed her jewelry was gone. She forgot about the storage unit. She was under so much stress, preparing for the wedding, dealing with her family's pressure. She was desperate, panicked, and jumped to the worst conclusion. He paused. "I was an idiot for going along with it. I should have listened to you. I'm sorry." I realized I was crying softly. This was the first time I'd heard him say those words in a sincere tone. "Dad," I whispered, "you understand how deep this cut is?" His voice caught. Yes, I do. And if I could go back, I'd handle it differently. But I'm asking you now to give us a chance to fix this. Come to the reunion. Let's talk like a family. I didn't commit. I told him I needed time to think. After we hung up, I broke down, sobbing. How could I face Janice after all that? And yet, a part of me wanted some closure, an apology in person, an acknowledgement of the pain. Maybe it would help me move on. I discussed it with my therapist, who said that closure can sometimes help, but only if I felt ready and if I set boundaries. She suggested that if I chose to attend, I have an exit strategy. Maybe bring a friend or someone who supports me so I'm not alone. She also recommended I think about what I wanted from this meeting. Was it an apology, an admission of wrongdoing, reassurance that Dad wouldn't betray me again? Unless I was clear on that, I might leave feeling even more hurt. I also talked to my mom, who was furious that Dad would try to brush this under the rug with a party. She said she'd support me if I wanted to attend, but wouldn't blame me if I never wanted to see them again. In the end, I decided to go, but on my terms. I told Dad that I wasn't coming to a big, cheerful party. I would meet them a week before the reunion in a neutral location and we'd talk privately. If that conversation went well, I'd consider attending the event. Dad agreed. So, about a week before the planned reunion, I drove to a restaurant near Dad's house. I arrived early, my stomach flipping with nerves. I half expected them not to show, but then I saw Dad's car pull up. He stepped out with Janice. She looked tense, her hair carefully styled, wearing a blouse and skirt as though she'd dressed up for a job interview. Dad looked older than I remembered, worry lines etched on his face. We took a booth in the back, the atmosphere awkward. The waitress brought water and menus, but we barely glanced at them. I started, I agreed to this because I want clarity and an apology. If either of you tries to minimize what happened, I'm leaving. Dad nodded quickly. Of course, absolutely. Janice? He turned to her expectantly. She cleared her throat, eyes flitting between me and the table. I'm so sorry, she began, voice trembling. You have no idea how terrible I felt when we realized the jewelry was in storage. I'd packed it months earlier, but my memory, well, I've been under a lot of stress. I truly believed it had been stolen, and you were the only other person in the house that night. The logical conclusion. I cut in. The logical conclusion was that I stole it? That says a lot about what you think of me. She winced. I know. It was a rash assumption. I'd heard from your dad that you were struggling with money. I glared at Dad, who looked away. So he had fed her some story about my finances. She continued, and I panicked. They were heirloom pieces, very sentimental. I wasn't thinking straight. I just discovered them missing and jumped to conclusions. Then you left so abruptly that evening. I left after dinner, as always, I corrected. There was nothing abrupt about it. She sighed. Okay, I guess that was in my head. But either way, I was sure you'd taken them, and I demanded your dad do something. I threatened to call the police myself if he wouldn't back me up. He didn't want to believe it at first, but I was hysterical, and eventually he relented. My chest tightened. So you manipulated him with your hysterics? She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. Yes, I suppose I did, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine how awful it was for you, being accused like that. Dad spoke up softly. I should have trusted you. I should have known you better. But I was torn. Janice was insistent, and the jewelry was definitely missing. I panicked too, not wanting her to lose these precious heirlooms. I exhaled. You two realize the damage, right? That I lost months of peace. I had to hire a lawyer, and people in our extended family thought I was a thief. Janice nodded, wiping tears. I'll pay back whatever legal fees or damages you incurred. I want to make it up to you. I know money can't fix everything, but it's a start. I paused, staring at her. Her tears seemed genuine, her voice shaky. Dad looked similarly distressed. It's not just about money, I said quietly. It's about trust and respect. You looked at me like I was some criminal, even though you'd known me for over a year. Dad reached across the table, trying to place his hand on mine. I pulled back. He sighed. I know. We broke your trust, and we've regretted it every day since we found the jewelry. We tried to drop the charges right away, but the system had to run its course. I'm sorry we put you in that position. I thought about the countless nights I cried, the fear of a potential criminal record, the gossip that spread. My mind flashed through all that pain. Then I swallowed hard. So, what do you want from me now? Janice said, we want to start over if possible. Not wipe away the past, but try to rebuild a relationship. We're having the family reunion because we've basically been living in a bubble, ignoring the shame of what happened. We want to re-enter the family fold, so to speak, and we don't want you on the outside. We want you with us. I let out a bitter laugh. You realize how self-serving that sounds, right? You want to put on a big show for the family to prove you're one happy household, and you need me to play along. She looked down, tears slipping down her cheeks. I won't deny it's partly that, but it's also because we truly miss you. Your dad misses you terribly, and I regret the wedge I drove between you. Dad spoke up earnestly. I don't want a perfect facade. I just want my daughter. And I'm so ashamed that I lost you over this fiasco. Please, if there's anything we can do, counseling, family therapy, paying back your legal fees, tell us. I felt my own tears threatening. There was a flicker of longing inside me. I did miss having a father who was present in my life, who cared about me. But could I trust him again? I took a deep breath. We can try to fix this, but it won't be quick or easy. If you think a single apology or a check for my lawyer's bills is enough, you're mistaken. I need time to see consistent effort from you, Dad, and from you, Janice, if we're to have any relationship. They both nodded vigorously. Yes, of course, Dad said. We're willing to do whatever it takes. If you can find it in your heart to come to this family event, we can start the healing process there. But if not, we understand. I studied Janice. If I come, you'd better own up to what you did in front of the rest of the family. Some of them still think I'm a thief. I'm not going to endure whispers at that reunion. You should be the one to set the record straight publicly. She swallowed, then gave a small nod. Yes, I owe you that. I'll do it. I sniffed, wiping away a tear. Then maybe I'll come, but I'm not promising to stay the whole time. And if I sense any attempt to sugarcoat the facts, I'm leaving. Dad exhaled, a look of relief washing over him. That's fair. We accept your conditions. The rest of the meeting was spent discussing specifics. They offered to write a letter to the family in advance, explaining that I'd been falsely accused. I told them it might be better if they spoke to people face to face. Eventually, we parted ways. Janice tried to hug me as we stood to leave, but I stepped back. Not ready for that, I said. She nodded, understanding. Dad looked pained, but didn't push it. Over the next week, I debated whether to actually attend the reunion. Part of me wanted to skip it entirely, let them face the music alone. But my therapist reminded me that confronting these issues head-on might be cathartic if I felt emotionally prepared. I also wanted to see the extended family members who doubted me, to look them in the eye as Janice took responsibility. So on the day of the reunion, I got dressed in something comfortable but presentable, took a deep breath, and drove to the park. The moment I arrived, I saw the crowd. Aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, coworkers, all gathered around tables laden with food. Balloons and banners announcing family and friends reunion flapped in the breeze. I spotted Dad and Janice near a pavilion, greeting people. I parked, fighting the urge to turn around and drive home. Then I walked forward, heart pounding. A hush fell over the nearest group when they spotted me. Whispers flew. Some smiles, some looks of uncertainty. Dad hurried over, wearing a nervous grin. "I'm so glad you came," he said softly. I nodded, arms crossed. "I'm here. Don't make me regret it." He signaled Janice, who approached, also looking anxious. She cleared her throat, addressing the people around us. "Everyone," she said, voice wavering. "I'd like to make an announcement. Please gather round for a minute." Slowly, folks drifted closer, curious. My aunt gave me a small smile. My cousin looked relieved. Others simply watched. When the crowd had formed, Janice took a deep breath. Some of you might recall that there was a misunderstanding last year involving missing jewelry. I accused my stepdaughter of stealing it. That accusation turned out to be false. The jewelry had been misplaced. I realize some rumors may still be out there, so I want to publicly apologize and clarify that she was completely innocent. Any suspicion cast on her was my error. I'm deeply sorry. She paused, tears in her eyes. I know I caused a lot of pain. Please understand that I was under immense stress and jumped to the wrong conclusion. She never took anything. I was the one who put the items in storage and forgot. So if anyone still doubts her, you're doubting the truth. She was exonerated. It's my fault. I hope somehow we can all move forward. There was a quiet murmur among the relatives. Some looked taken aback by her frank confession. My eyes misted as I absorbed the relief of hearing her set the record straight. Dad stepped in, placing a hand on Janice's shoulder. I stand by that apology, he added. I also owe my daughter a huge apology for not believing her. I was wrong, and I'm grateful she's here today, giving us a chance to heal.
Good.
My throat was tight with emotion. The crowd slowly dispersed, some offering me nods or quick embraces, saying things like, "So glad it all worked out." My cousin whispered, "I knew you didn't do it," and gave me a hug. I felt years of tension unraveling. Then Janice turned to me, eyes full of remorse. "Thank you for letting me do that. I hope it helps repair your reputation." I swallowed. "It does. Thank you for saying it publicly. That's all I wanted." Dad looked at me, hope shining in his gaze. "Can we talk alone for a moment?" I nodded. We walked a short distance away near the edge of the park under a big oak tree. He took a shaky breath. "I know an apology might never be enough, but from the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry. I was a terrible father, choosing to believe Janice over you. I hope someday we can rebuild our bond. I love you, kiddo." Tears slipped down my cheeks. "You really hurt me, Dad." He nodded. "I know, and I might never forgive myself, but I promise from now on I'll show you in actions, not just words, that I trust you." We embraced tentatively. It felt both comforting and strange, a reminder of the father I loved. "I'm not ready to be best buddies," I warned, pulling back, "but I'm willing to see how this goes, step by step." He agreed wholeheartedly. "That's all I can ask." The rest of the reunion was emotionally draining, but at least it was no longer overshadowed by suspicion. People came up to me, apologized for believing gossip, expressed relief that the family drama had resolved. Janice hovered in the background, occasionally meeting my eyes with a grateful, apologetic look. Dad stayed by my side for a bit, introducing me to his friends from work, the ones who'd also heard the false accusations. I was polite, though part of me still seethed with lingering resentment. Throughout the afternoon, I found pockets of calm. My cousin and I sat on a picnic bench, sipping lemonade, talking about anything but the theft fiasco, our jobs, relationships, vacation plans. It felt good to have normalcy after so long. My aunt gave me a big hug, whispering, "I always had faith in you. I'm so sorry you went through that." I responded that it meant a lot to hear her say that now. Near the end of the reunion, Janice mustered the courage to approach me directly again. "Thank you for giving us this chance," she said softly. "I know I still have to earn your trust. I want you to know that I'm committed to therapy and working on my anxiety. It's not an excuse, but I realize I have issues that led me to suspect the worst in people." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "I appreciate that. I hope you can see how much damage a false accusation can do." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "I do, and I'll never forgive myself for it, but I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you let me." I gave a hesitant shrug. "We'll see." She looked down, accepting that answer. Then she thanked me again and walked away. By the time the sun began to set, I was ready to leave. Dad caught me before I went to my car. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm exhausted, but I'm okay," I replied. He wrung his hands. I'd love to meet for dinner sometime soon, just the two of us. We can talk more, catch up, if you want." I hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Sure, let's do that. I'll text you." He looked visibly relieved, smiling gently. Then, with a final hug, we parted ways. I drove home, the events of the day swirling in my mind. It was a bittersweet ending, no tidy resolution, but at least we'd begun to address the rift. Over the next few weeks, Dad reached out more regularly. We met for dinner once, chatting about everyday stuff, his job, my career, our extended family. We didn't delve too deep into the old wound, but it felt like a step toward normalcy. Janice occasionally sent me texts, sharing updates on her therapy or forwarding pictures of family gatherings with an invitation to join. Sometimes I responded politely, other times I didn't. I was still sorting through my anger. My therapist reminded me that forgiveness is a process, not a single moment. She said it's okay to maintain boundaries, to move as slowly as I need. Dad and Janice had proven they could face the consequences of their mistake, at least partially, by publicly admitting it. But it would take consistent effort on their part to rebuild the trust they'd shattered. I set small, achievable goals. Maybe visit Dad's house for a short dinner, see if Janice treats me respectfully, maybe invite Dad out for coffee once a month. There was no rush to be a big, happy family again, or maybe we never were a big, happy family to begin with. Still, life felt lighter without the stigma of a theft accusation hanging over me. I told friends that I was tentatively reconciling with my dad. They were supportive, though some warned me to be cautious. I wholeheartedly agreed. One day, Dad called to tell me Janice had found my old baby pictures in a box she was organizing. She'd carefully set them aside, wanting to ask if I'd like them. I told him yes, it would be nice to have them. A few days later, a package arrived with those photos, along with a handwritten note from Janice. I'm returning these to the rightful owner. Your dad cherishes them, but we thought you might want them for safekeeping. Thank you for giving us a chance to show we've changed. I stared at the note, my emotions swirling. A year ago, I'd have spat on anything she gave me. Now I felt a cautious sense of relief that maybe we were on a path towards some sort of civility. I put the photos in an album, telling myself that if Dad and Janice kept up these gestures of respect and apology, maybe a functional relationship was possible someday. Months passed. Dad invited me to smaller family outings, and I accepted, always ensuring my comfort level. Each time, Janice greeted me politely, never stepping over boundaries. She asked about my work in a supportive, not condescending way. Dad never again brought up the theft incident unless I did, and when I did, he repeated how sorry he was. In time, I stopped bringing it up as frequently, focusing on the present rather than the past. We weren't close, but the hostility lessened. Eventually, Dad and Janice renewed their wedding vows in a modest ceremony, wanting a do-over from their hasty civil union. They asked if I'd be willing to attend. I hesitated, but decided to go, if only to confirm that I could handle being around them without resentment bubbling over. The ceremony was small, just immediate family and a few friends, and Janice looked genuinely radiant in her simple white gown. Dad was nervous but beaming. I watched from the second row, tears prickling my eyes, not because I was overwhelmed with joy, but because I remembered how drastically things had changed in the last couple of years. At the reception, Janice thanked me specifically for attending, saying my presence meant everything to Dad. I just nodded, giving her a small smile. Leaving that event, I felt like maybe I'd finally made peace with the nightmare they'd put me through. That didn't mean I'd forgotten. The betrayal was part of our shared history now, a scar that wouldn't fully vanish. But scars can fade with time, become less painful to the touch. Dad and Janice were showing consistent remorse and effort, which helped me believe that we could maintain a cautious yet functional relationship. To this day, I still shudder remembering how Dad pressed charges against me, how Janice's panic and assumptions nearly cost me my freedom and reputation. But we've come a long way. We're not the perfect blended family they might have envisioned, but we've forged a new normal. Dad and I talk regularly, though not daily. Janice and I are polite and friendly, though not best friends. She occasionally invites me to lunch. Sometimes I decline. Other times I accept if the timing feels right. And that's where we stand, an uneasy truce that leans toward healing. It's a testament to the fact that people can change, can regret their mistakes, and can attempt to rectify them. It's also a testament to the resilience of love, or at least the desire for familial connection, that I'm willing to engage with them after such a betrayal. Some might say I forgave too easily. Others might say I was right to give them a second chance. Only time will tell if we remain on this path. But for now, we at least share a mutual understanding. We all made choices that led to heartbreak. We can't undo the past. We can only move forward slowly, one step at a time, hoping trust can grow where it was once torn apart by false accusations. And in that slow, careful dance of reconciliation, I hold on to my sense of self, my boundaries, and the lesson that nobody, no matter how close, gets a free pass to destroy my life without consequences. If Dad wants me in his life, he has to remember that I was there all along, his daughter, worthy of his trust, and that next time, he'd better trust me before it's too late.